Hugh Jackson is a name synonymous with losing and dysfunction. He may be one of the worst head coaches ever in the modern era of sports. But to understand why a guy who is legitimately a top-tier offensive coordinator suddenly turns into the worst coach in sports history, we need to take a deep dive. On October 29, 2018, Hugh Jackson was fired after 2.5 seasons as the Browns head coach. In that time, Hugh Jackson went an infamous 336-1. That win percentage of .088, yes, .088, is the worst by far of any coach in Cleveland Browns history. His 2-year stretch from 2016 to 2018 of 131.032 is the worst 2-year stretch of all time in NFL history. Hugh's career win percentage of .205 over 56 games is the worst win percentage in the modern era of NFL football. That number is not just a historic low for football, it's a historic low for all 3 major U.S. sports. No Major League Baseball manager who has coached 2 seasons has ever had a win percentage below 300, while in the NBA, no coach with 3 full seasons has ever had a win percentage below 250, which might literally make Hugh Jackson the worst coach of all time. The W.O.A.T. But why? What is it about Hugh Jackson that turns him from a good coordinator, a legitimately good coordinator? Well, to understand this, we have to go no further than his first year ever as a coach, the often forgot about 2011 year in Oakland. There are a few constants that will keep getting mentioned throughout this video about Hugh Jackson, some positives, some negatives. The one positive thing that I will always say about Hugh Jackson is that he is a pretty good offensive coordinator. He has had 3 top 10 rushing offenses per DVOA. He has had the #1 passing offense with Andy Dalton. Even during his infamous 1-31 stretch, the offenses were never as bad as you would expect a 1-win in 2-year offense to be. Not saying it was great by any measure, but I've definitely seen worse. Eric Mangini. If skills and knowledge could live in a vacuum, Hugh Jackson would still be NFL and still be a phenomenal offensive coordinator till this day. But Hugh's biggest problem has never been his playbook. It's his massive ego. Hugh's ego is a magnet for power struggles and dysfunction wherever he goes. Hugh's ego leads to terrible personnel decisions wherever he goes. Hugh's ego always makes him a horrible game manager, and his ego, most importantly, makes him incapable of taking personal responsibility, which makes him an awful leader of any team. And this was all on display in 2011. Now, this Raiders season is very significant because it's the season that Al Davis unfortunately died. Al Davis was the owner of the Raiders, and he was a very involved owner up until the day that he died. The Raiders didn't have a GM because Al Davis was the GM. He was the entire team, the entire franchise, the entire organization. All was Al Davis's. So when he passed away, there was a massive power vacuum left behind. So it really isn't a coincidence that just 10 days after Al Davis died, Hugh Jackson pulled the trigger on a massive trade for retired quarterback Carson Palmer for a 1st and 2nd round pick. But see, the trade itself is bad in retrospect, but at the time it wasn't bad. What made all of this just terrible was Hugh Jackson's ego when he proclaimed that this trade would be the greatest trade of all time. It was not the greatest trade of all time. Because once Carson Palmer took the reins of this team, they went 4-6 from that point, and then Carson played one more forgettable bad year in Oakland, only to get released by the team and have a huge career resurgence in Arizona. But still, not only was the trade bad, not only was the end result bad, but Hugh Jackson's reaction to the end result was terrible, because after his team lost a Week 17 win-in-you're-in scenario type game to San Diego, Hugh went on a rant where he threw everybody under the bus.
No, I'm pissed at you. Finally, I'm going to tell you, I'm pissed at my team. At some point in time, as a group of men, you go in the game, and you can say whatever you want about coaches, you win the game. Here's your time. Here's your time to make some plays. And we didn't get them stopped, and we didn't make enough plays. So, yeah, I'm pissed at the team.
He was fired soon after the fact. It's funny because at the time that the Browns hired Hugh Jackson, I remember one of the biggest positive points that people made with Hugh Jackson was that he found a way to go 8-8 in Oakland, right? But in retrospect, if we looked at that 8-8 season in Oakland with any scrutiny, we would have realized that this guy was full of red flags, because that 8-8 2011 season, which is Hugh Jackson's claim to fame, by the way, is full of all the awful Hugh Jackson tropes. Gambling on an over-the-hill quarterback, blowing leads with bad game management, being involved in massive power struggles, refusing to take any responsibility for the failure of the team. Nothing about Hugh Jackson should have surprised us in 2016, because it was all in display in 2011. But nonetheless, Hugh Jackson got to work, and the first item on his agenda was to get it right at quarterback. That year, the Browns had the second pick in the 2016 draft. There were two quarterbacks available, Jared Goff and Carson Wentz. Both of these guys were seen as pretty much unanimous 1 and 2 guys. Hugh, like everybody else, loved Jared Goff. He absolutely loved him. California guy, just like Hugh. Hugh wanted Jared Goff, but he had the second pick, and the Rams traded up the farm, honestly, to get Jared Goff, which took him off the board. Now, Carson Wentz, who a lot of people liked, a lot of people even liked him more than Jared Goff, Hugh Jackson was lukewarm on. But Hugh did fall in love with the quarterback. He wasn't a guy available in the draft, but he was a guy who was available in free agency, and his name was RG3. After a private workout, it's reported that Hugh Jackson was smitten with RG3. And at the time, it wasn't the craziest thing in the world to gamble on RG3 unless you had the second pick in the draft. But Hugh, being Hugh and the quarterback guru, believed that he can rebuild RG3 to make him that top-tier guy that he was in 2012. So Hugh gave the front office the green light to pass on Carson Wentz and explore trade downs, because that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to work on RG3. How did this work out?
He's hanging that left arm pretty low.
That left arm is really hanging.
Just throwing a quick out to the left. Oh, no, he didn't get hit. No. That's some effects of the previous play.
He started 5 games and finished 3 of them. Now, I'll be honest here. Everything else that happened in 2015, despite the loss to the Ravens and the loss to the Dolphins, really wasn't Hugh Jackson's fault. The 2015 was bare. It was awful. It was talentless. The few pieces of talent they had were old, and at this point, quite frankly, just beaten down and unmotivated. And that being the case, I was willing to accept 1-15, because that was the only record you could have had and still gotten Myles Garrett. So that's fine. But 2017, that's a whole nother deal. The dysfunction that led to this 0-16 season is pretty much all on you. And it's the dysfunction that led to that season. I'm not going to sit here and make the argument that the 2017 Browns were trying to win. They weren't. Sachi wasn't trying to win. He cut Joe Hayden for no reason and signed Kenny Britt to replace Terrell Pryor. He wasn't trying to win. But there was so much more on that 2017 team as far as talent, because they brought in center J.C. Tretter, guard Kevin Zeitler, Jason McCourty, in addition to drafting Myles Garrett, Jabril Peppers, David Njoku, and Larry Ogunjobi. These are guys who, for the most part, play a role today, except for Kevin Zeitler, who got traded for a supposed to be talented player, and Jason McCourty, who was a very valuable player on the Patriots. These are good players that they brought in, much better players than they had the year before. But Hugh did not agree with that assessment, and instead of doing something to make the team better with his coaching and leadership, he would just complain to the media about how Hugh Jackson is not satisfied with the players that Hugh Jackson has. Now, one thing to be fair about is that the quarterback situation this year, it was awful. It was a choice of Deshaun Kaiser, who Hugh thought would be special. He went on record saying that, and then as the season went on, trashed him week on and week on. And then Cody Kessler, who Hugh had told us to trust would be great. Now, I don't blame him for that one. I honestly think he took that bullet for Sachi in his first year. And then Kevin Hogan, who, let's not get it twisted, he was awful, but he might have been the best option that year, and he was the third stringer. Now, I'm not going to make you watch the montage of 0-16 again. I'm not going to do that to you. I am going to say that this decision in Detroit made by Hugh Jackson probably sums it all up.
You know, and that's a quarterback sneak from, over 2 yards out. I don't love that call.
But what hurt this team and what caused this team to be 0-16 wasn't the roster. It was the dysfunction behind the scenes, and that was spearheaded solely by Hugh Jackson. Hugh and Sachi beef for most of 2017. This came to its, quite frankly, logical conclusion seconds before the 2017 trade deadline. Hugh had made a habit of consistently complaining directly to Jimmy Haslam that year about the roster, much like he did to the media, which made Haslam sympathetic to Hugh's call to make some upgrades to the team. Now, that year, there were some good players being traded, quarterbacks specifically. Jimmy Garoppolo went for a second-round pick to San Francisco. Jacoby Brissett went to the Colts in exchange for Philip Dorsett. This led to the Browns offering a second-round pick and a third-round pick for AJ McCarron. This is the trade that Hugh Jackson and Jimmy Haslam found. Sachi Brown, once he was informed of this trade that Jimmy and Hugh wanted to make, did what should be remembered as one of the most noble and circumstantial sacrifices in Brown's history. Because according to some reports, he deliberately held off on faxing the trade agreement to the league office until after the 4 p.m. trade deadline. Effectively, he vetoed this terrible trade. Now, after this incident, he was fired. But let's take a step back and imagine what this team would look like currently if that trade would have went through. That second-round pick that they would have sent to the Bengals for AJ McCarron was Nick Chubb. That's the pick that got you Nick Chubb and redeemed the terrible Austin Corbett pick. And to think that we almost got rid of the best offensive player on what could be argued is a loaded offense for AJ McCarron is mind-boggling. As for the Browns that season, they continued to stink. They underperformed, and they went 0-16 because all of this garbage was going on behind the scenes. Now, this season was a season that was full of stupid beefs. He had a beef with Todd Haley because Todd Haley was brought in to run the offense after Jimmy Haslam requested that Hugh stop running the offense because it seemed to be getting in the way of his ability to coach the team. Hugh disagreed, but he wanted to keep his job, so he brought in Todd Haley. Todd Haley took one look around Cleveland and thought, boy, this stinks, and started plotting his own way to get to the head coaching chair. So things got awkward and beef ensued there. Long story short, halfway through the season, they both got fired for beefing with each other. And then he had a beef with Baker Mayfield because Baker wanted to play early on and Hugh didn't let him. And then when Baker took the reins, he tried to bench him again, which did not work out. So that beef resulted in this moment.
Unbelievable play. What a backbreaker, but a game of inches. And I don't know.
Hugh could have been a decent head coach, but his Achilles heel has always been his ego. When his ego gets threatened, when his ego gets challenged, when he has to put his ego aside, he chooses the other direction. That led to Hugh Jackson burning every bridge that he had in the Browns organization. And not only did he burn every bridge with the organization, he went on national TV to pretty much not take credit for all of the failure that he was most definitely a part of because of the same thing that drove him to be on the TV shows. His ego. He can't take responsibility for anything. He can't accept fault or failure. It's always somebody else. It's not Hugh Jackson. He never points the finger at himself. He'll say it, but his actions always act differently. And that's why Hugh Jackson's entire coaching career, all of the failures, all of the mishaps, all of the losses are quite frankly all on Hugh Jackson. I don't care what hand he was dealt, because even in Oakland, when he was dealt a first place hand, he fumbled that away because he's a terrible head coach. He's never been good. He's a great coordinator, no doubt. And if you let him sit in a bubble and only work on the offense, he's spectacular. He's pretty good at that. The fact of the matter is that Hugh Jackson doesn't work well with others in a team sport. It was never going to work with Hugh as the leader, no matter what hand you dealt him. This is what Hugh Jackson is. But at the end of the day, Hugh Jackson was a uniquely bad fit to be a head coach of any team, and honestly, that should have been seen in 2015 when they hired him. That's my thoughts about Hugh Jackson. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Let's try to keep it clean down there. But thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, ding that notification bell so you can be notified when I upload. And also, guys, thank you guys for watching. Have a great day. Have a good night.